Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, the thought of having a consensual sexual relationship with a sibling, well, it usually shocks people. But we'll tell you why one German ethics council just voted to decriminalize incest between consenting adults. A little peek at what our online community thinks about this subject, and I was surprised, that's for sure. I was expecting a more sort of gut reaction, and we've got a lot of really intellectual conversation going on. Malika Bilal is our digital producer of the stream. What are you finding?
A really intelligent, nuanced conversation, but in fact, it was our community that called for us to do this show, and that call came on Facebook from Atagika, who wrote us asking us to look into the German case that you mentioned, and which we'll talk about in today's show. So to do that, we need your help. Tweet us your questions and your comments with hashtag AJStream.
So I know that many of you are watching this show and doing a few other things as well. And while you're on your computers, well, you can use them to actually connect with us. So have a look out here, all the things you can connect with us via. We've got Facebook and Twitter, Google+, Instagram, so many ways for you to also be in the stream. For most people, the thought of a consensual sexual relationship between adult siblings immediately brings up reactions of disbelief. But there are those who believe it's everybody's right to choose who they want to be with, including a family member. Germany's National Ethics Council recently voted to decriminalize incest between consenting adults, stating that criminal law is not the appropriate means to preserve a social taboo. Now, critics of that decision immediately point to the higher risk of genetic defects in children, but supporters argue that non-incestuous couples who are more likely to have special needs children are free from legal restrictions. While Angela Merkel's ruling party has rejected the council's decision, some are now asking why consensual incest is socially taboo, and is it really necessary to prosecute those consenting adults? So with us to help us talk about this via Skype we have Fez, and he says he's in a relationship with his half sister. He's asked that we hide his identity, including his real name. Deborah Lieberman is an associate professor of psychology at the University of Miami, and she's done extensive research on moral judgments regarding sex between siblings. With us via Google Plus Hangout, we have Brad Dacus. He's president at the Pacific Justice Institute, and that's a non-profit organization that specializes in the defense of religious freedom. So welcome, everybody. Fez, tell us about your girlfriend. What's she like?
Well, she's 24. I can't really go into too much detail about her.
Why do you like her? What's
without sounding extremely weird. Maybe because her personality is a bit like my personality.
All right. What's that personality like?
Just like generally nice, kind. She loves video games.
Okay.
Likes a lot of the same music. I don't know, it's just I can't really put it into words.
Do you look like each other?
Yeah.
Okay. You look like brother and sister?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do, yeah.
All right.
Not denying that.
How did you meet? Because you didn't grow up together.
No, we didn't grow up together. Basically, my father passed away last year, and after he had passed away, somebody on Facebook got in contact with her. She didn't see it until a little bit later on, and by the way, she never knew him or really knew of him, and I only really knew a little bit about her, but no grand details. So she looked at his Facebook profile, and when she found him, unfortunately, he had passed away, and she went on a little part of the information which said family, and then there was my name, and then she looked me up, and then that's how we started to communicate and talk, and eventually we met up, and there was just sparks flying everywhere.
So there is this thing that a lot of us, when we have siblings, we actually don't find them attracted. We're not sexually attracted to them. The idea is a bit, I think if I could sum it up, a bit gross. It's like a, ugh. Did you have did you have that feeling when you met your half sister, or was it more like meeting a future lover?
It was more like meeting a future lover. It was sort of like I was presented, this is your sister. Now you've got to love her like a sister, and you've got to see her like a sister, and I just couldn't see her as just a sister. So it was sort of like I felt like I'd met the person that I'd always longed to be with without even knowing it.
Wow. So that time between when you were meeting up and getting to know your half sister that you didn't really know, and that time between you kissing her and then going into a different kind of relationship, how long was that?
It wasn't very long at all. It was I'd say about in the space of a month or two.
Okay. All right. So you went from a sister to a lover in a month. Okay. Malika.
Well,
yeah,
Fez, people hearing your story, of course, have a lot of things to say about it. Azabaz on Twitter says that there are so many people other than your siblings to choose from. So the question is, why your half-sister? You were in previous relationships before your half-sister, right?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
So what was it about her that made this different?
It wasn't even anything about being related to each other or anything like that. It was just sort of like just like anyone else, when they meet the person that they feel like they're meant for. Only with us, it feels like there's just that barrier there because of the status of your brother, your sister, so you can't do this sort of thing. But it didn't really.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Let me just bring in Brad into the conversation. Brad, in the UK, it's illegal to have a sexual relationship with any of your grandparents, with your half sibling, with your stepfather, with an adopted parent. All of those are covered in an incestuous relationship. All of that is criminal. So basically, if the police wanted to come and find Fez, he could get put in prison for what he's currently doing. Do you feel what he's doing is criminal behaviour? This is what the German ethics committee were talking about. I don't think people like Fez should be in prison for what they're doing. What's your take?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I by no means in any way want to disqualify the sincerity or reality of Fez and his relationship. But when we look at it from a macro perspective, we have to look at the impact on society and others, specifically with regards to children, the risk of children being born. As far as first-degree incest, which is between a mother or a sibling, you're looking at a 41% risk of a child being born with birth defects, and another 11% of risk of being born with mental defects. So it's extremely high when we're talking about siblings and parents. When you're talking about first cousins, right, it's a nominal increase in risk.
So Brad, 4%. You think that Fez should be a criminal because of future children he might have with his sister? That's why you thought it should be criminalized.
Right. As a matter of just public policy, we know that when people engage in relationships, even if they don't intend to have children, children happen. In fact, a third of all children that are conceived accidentally, which, I mean, not that they're accidents, but they're not planned pregnancy, should I say.
Right. Okay, so you feel there is a point of law here because of future children. All right, Malika.
Well, speaking about whether or not there is a point of law, Deborah, I want to bring you in here with this Facebook comment from George. He says, I'm of the opinion that incest shouldn't qualify as a crime. We can't legislate all human behavior, especially things that people do behind closed doors. But Deborah, of course, we do legislate many types of human behavior. So should this be different?
I don't think this should be different, but let me just get back to the idea that it might be punished because of the possible genetic outcomes to offspring. So the idea that, so Brad is correct, that there is an increase above population average of offspring of siblings, having greater disease and mutations and problems. And so you could ballpark it around 41% perhaps, but that kind of pales in comparison when you think of some autosomal dominant mutations. So Huntington's disease, for instance, there's a 50% chance one of your parents has the gene, Huntington gene, there's a 50% chance you will get it. And if you get it, you will definitely develop this disorder, which is a neurodegenerative disorder. So that's 50%. So and then you can talk about women who are older than 40, 45, 50, trying to conceive, and the chances of having a child with a birth defect. Or you could talk about other people. I mean, there's always a chance that you're going to have a child with some abnormality, with some genetic defect. There's not, the range is from 0 to 1.
Okay.
And so inbreeding might increase it. And I don't think that that's necessarily a very strong ground, or it's a very slippery slope to propose legislation for why, therefore, incest should be punished.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to comment if I can, because I think those are some very good points that Deborah just made. First off, with people with regard to having a prior disease, usually that's not known until after they're married. It's not a premeditated assumption of risk as it is with incest. And also with regard to women in their 40s, that risk is paralleled with people who are first cousins who are engaged in incestuous relationship, but not first degree incestuous relationship. It's very, very high. And then we also look at it from a more of a macro perspective, like the British Pakistanis, for example, where you do have a large percentage engaging in incestuous relationships among cousins alone, increases it to 39% for the entire community. A serious,
right, but it's not illegal to marry your first cousin in the UK. So we're going slightly off topic here, but I understand you're making a genetic argument. Let me introduce you to two people back here on my laptop. So we have Patrick Stuberg here and Susan Karolewski. These are the German couple that actually prompted the German National Ethics Council to say, I don't think these people should be criminals. So Patrick here has been in prison several times for incest, because incest is still illegal in Germany. But we spoke to Endrik Wilhelm, and that's Patrick's lawyer, and this is what he told us about that idea that perhaps children should not be the reason for you to make incestuous couples criminals. Have a listen to this.
Can disabled children be a reason to prohibit anybody to have sex with each other? Can that really be a reason? I don't think so, because where do you start and where do you stop when you start thinking this way? You very, very quickly end up in the 30s, when the Nazis, when they said people who are disabled may not have children together. So this cannot be a reason at all. And if this reason is gone, if this reason is out of your brain, then you do not find another one to say that sexual intercourse between siblings can be a crime.
So here we have Endrik Wilhelm. He's was the lawyer of Patrick and Susan. They've actually now split up, so they no longer need a lawyer. But Fez, people are worried here. They're concerned about you and your girlfriend's future children that you may or may not have, but you're still both criminals right now. Do you think they've got a valid point of view?
I don't, unfortunately. I can understand the arguments and I can accept the arguments, but I still think, if I look into other countries where it's legal and they've taken all this into account, then I still can't bring myself to say like if me and my half-sister had a child, whether that child has defects or not. I know it's unfair if the child was born with defects, but we would still love the child just like anybody else would love the child. So I can't bring myself to see it as a valid reason for being a criminal.
Deborah, why do you think this taboo is so widespread? It seems almost universal around the world, where people are uncomfortable about the idea of adult siblings having a consensual sexual relationship. Where does that come from?
That's a great question. So I would probably say that it's not the taboo that's universal, but more the natural aversion that all of us have a propensity toward. And so if you talk about Fez, for instance, and siblings, the question becomes, how do sexual aversions develop between individuals who are kin or who are genetic relatives? And so part of my research has been looking at how siblings develop sexual aversions toward one another. And it looks like a history of co-residence during childhood is a really important factor. So the longer you live with someone during childhood, the more you see the same woman who's caring for you, feeding you, bathing you, doing that for another child, the more certain you can be that that individual is a genetic relative. And so it ends up that that certainty is what then patterns your aversion. So the greater exposure to these kinship cues, the stronger your aversion. And so I should also...
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, Deborah, what you're basically saying is that naturally, just as human beings who live in a family, that we naturally grow up thinking, actually, this is my sister, this is my brother, I'm not going to date them.
That's right. I mean,
right, okay.
Your parents never had to pull you aside and say, by the way, don't have sex with your brother. This is not something that's typically communicated, or at least the undergraduate students I asked don't ever recall their parents ever having such a conversation.
Sure.
And this isn't surprising. Other animals develop natural sexual aversions to their siblings as well. So it's not just in humans.
Right.
Yeah, I like to comment. It made a good point in that everything from the cockroach to the lions and gorillas, all animals are instinctively averse to incestuous relationships for the preservation of the species. And as I pointed out, when even in one experimental example of British Pakistanis, when there's any kind of a loosening of that at all, the impact upon the human DNA and the survival of human beings is very contrary to that instinctive protection. So we have to look at it from promoting the general welfare, and it's a responsibility of government to adopt policies that protect the general welfare. And what more can we talk about general welfare than protecting the human race and the DNA?
Well, actually, let me just correct you there. So it ends up that we have these inbreeding aversions, not for any result that might happen at the group level, but it's really just based on the genes in the individual. So I avoid having sex with my close relatives because it has negative consequences on my offspring, regardless of what it does to the group at large. But I think you make a very good point that thinking about in today's society, the ramifications of having, children with increased developmental needs, for instance. And my reading of the literature suggests that children, when they are in relationships that are not traditional, so you can take same-sex parents, for instance, that there's a very mixed reading in the literature about whether it's beneficial. Right. And so just having read some stuff this morning, the way the statistics are done in these studies are quite, you have to be very careful. But the factor that seems to dictate childhood outcomes is the closeness of the parents, not necessarily whether they're same-sex or opposite sex, but rather that the parents are close. And this is why you tend to find that adoptive parents don't have such problems. So the developmental needs are important, but I think that the science needs to back that up, and obviously more studies are needed.
Well, Deborah, in talking about the needs of the children, we got this tweet here from Adam Mota. And Fez, I'll read this and direct this to you. This person says, it's going to bring a different dynamic to family relations. And what happens when you decide to break up? Is that a conversation that you and your girlfriend have had?
We had the conversation, and basically, the moment we got together, we I wouldn't say we ceased seeing each other in the way that we see each other, but we certainly mostly 99% see each other as boyfriend and girlfriend. And if unfortunately we ever did decide to break up, then I guess we would have to try and see each other in the way that we were dictated to see each other. But certainly, I still don't think there's any power dynamic there, though. I can't see that.
What about being criminals and breaking the law right now, Fez? Because regardless of how you explain what you're doing, right now in the UK, what you're doing is illegal. How do you actually live your daily life knowing that maybe perhaps some of your relatives might report you, somebody might report you, and then there could be some very serious consequences?
When we got together, I just sort of accepted there might be consequences. Things could go this way or could go that way, and no matter how I spanned things, I still just wanted to be with her. I still didn't feel like a criminal. I didn't feel like I was harming anybody. We keep ourselves to ourselves, and and that's it. And just like any relationship, we deserve the right to be with each other and have that privacy protected.
You know, Deborah, we got this Facebook comment from someone, and it's an interesting point that I want to raise with you. He writes in, the nature of families means that consent is less likely to be valid and autonomous, and more likely to be tainted by imbalances in power, i.e. age, maturity, etc. Is there a certain level of functionality or dysfunctionality that you see when you're studying cases like this?
So let me respond to awful bad jerk, which was that guy's handle there. So I think that, in fact, when you have consensual sex between two adults, you are sidestepping a lot of these issues that occur when you have young children involved, for instance, or when it is rape or abuse of a minor within the family. And so I think once you bring it into the realm of adulthood, I think that things do change. And so what's foreign to most people is that you could possibly be attracted to your sister. So some people would say there has to be some type of abuse there. There has to be some strange sentiment. But in fact, it's, as Fez suggests, that they look at each other as if they were effectively strangers, and they evaluate each other based on the mating criteria that we all use when we try and find a mate. And so, no, I think that there's something different when you talk about adults.
Right. All right.
Yeah,
so
I got a question. Can I for Deborah, if it's possible?
So, Brian, I'm going to ask you to remember that
Yeah,
question, and we're going to take it to the post show, and we're going to leave everybody on a cliffhanger at stream.altozero.com. So that is Brad Dacus. He's the president of Pacific Justice Institute. You will hear what he has to say if you come to stream.altozero.com. If you don't, you have to tweet me. Deborah Lieberman is Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of Miami, and also Fez, who is dating his half-sister in the UK. We'll hear from all of our guests more in the post-show. But right now, here's Malika with some of the other stories that we're following on the stream.
We start in India, where a boxer in the Asian Games returned her bronze medal in a tearful protest after a controversial judging decision. Sarita Devi believes judges wrongly awarded a fight to her competitor, and she's borrowed $500 to lodge an official complaint. Indians online are outraged, saying the country's Olympic Association has failed to stand behind Devi. Extremely sad, IOA letting our sports stars down, Max tweets. Well, some accuse the Olympic organization of regional bias. Just because she's from the Northeast doesn't mean she doesn't belong to India, tweets Kondan. Next to Nigeria, where Twitter users are sharing their hopes on Independence Day using hashtag I dream of a Nigeria. Ojukwu tweets, I dream of a Nigeria where peace reigns and youth are the strength of the country. But others use the occasion to share harsh words about the government. I dream of a Nigeria where our borders won't be so corrupt and dirty, tweets Adebayo. And finally, we look ahead to a men's conference on gender equality. The UN event, co-hosted by Iceland and Suriname, will take place in January. Iceland's foreign affairs minister announced it, saying it will be the first time at the United Nations that we bring together only male leaders to discuss gender equality. Well, online, many aren't convinced this is the right step. How can you have a gender equality conference and only invite one gender, asked Riley. But Suriname's ambassador to the UN explains the point is not to exclude women. He told Newsweek that it's to create a space for men to talk openly among themselves. Well, what do you think? You can tweet us your thoughts at hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Thank you very much, Malika. Let me tell you about the next AJ stream. The Iranian President Hassan Rouhani made a lot of promises to his people during his election campaign. Now that he's been in office for over a year, we ask Iranians, how is he doing? Stay with us. The post show is next. I will see you at stream.altozero.com. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams online post show where we're carrying on our discussion on consensual incest and why some people actually believe it should be decriminalised. So still with us, we have Fez, who's in a relationship with his half-sister. Deborah Lieberman is an associate professor of psychology at the University of Miami, and Brad Dacres is president of the Pacific Justice Institute. I hope Brad has a really good memory because he had a question he was about to pose right at the end of our show, and I know I asked you just to hold that question. Brad, what did you want to ask?
Yeah, and I really appreciate the comments of Deborah, but I have a question, and that is, first off, people who do have adult relationships, there is a degree of them that started out relationships in children in an unhealthy way. I know you don't salute that, obviously, but if you do have a couple that comes in and they say, you know, we're thinking about getting married, we're first degree incest, would you treat that the same, honestly, as far as any couple, or do you in fact, you know, recognize that there's a lot of other issues coming into play, i.e. if they break up and get divorced, they're not going to have a complete severance and they're going to have an ongoing difficulty in their relationship that's going to, I mean, do you see this as more than just an alternative lifestyle as opposed to something that may need additional counseling, background review, and an assessment of the real risks mentally, emotionally that they're going to be dealing with?
Well, first, let me put on the table, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I can offer you what I think just based on my research and personal opinion here. But I think that if someone did come, I mean, I have spoken to some people about these sorts of things, and I would say that knowing the risks, just like getting into a relationship with anyone, there are always risks. Certainly getting into a relationship with a nuclear family member, it's a little bit more messy. Thanksgivings might become more uncomfortable should things go on. But I would say, should people be required to get that type of counseling and assessment and have the law get involved? I just don't see that the answer is clearly yes. There are risks inherent in a lot of things. This one, it ends up, there's a peak of interest here because the particular act is so disgusting to most. And it ends up that disgust in general flavors our moral norms. And I think that we have to be very careful in thinking about our moral norms, especially when things like disgust get activated. So, you know, in terms of the inherent difficulties, I think it would be important, you know, for these people to understand, yes, there are increased risks. Just like if you're a 45-year-old woman, you're going to try and have a child now, or 50 years old, that there are risks. So I think that it should be on the individuals. The individual should have the responsibility to understand these risks. And we can't play, you know, parent to every child, every person in the world to tell them what the best course of action to do is. We just have to provide the information and hope people seek it.
Fez, what's the reaction to you and your girlfriend when you go out together? Are you even able to tell people, this is my girlfriend, she also happens to be my sister?
No, we can't tell people that at all.
Right.
Most people haven't got a clue.
Yeah. Okay.
We've told a select few people, and generally my side of the family seem to be completely fine with it. A few people, like friends that we've told, seem to be completely fine with it. I mean, most don't agree, but they don't get involved and just say it's your business. But particularly her side of the family tend to make threats every now and then, like disgust, as you've mentioned. It sort of brings up, if you do this, we'll go to the police. And even when, say for instance, she's wore one of my jackets, she's gone back to her own house and she's put it in a washer, and then her mother said something like, that's disgusting, this is vile, all because of the situation that we're in.
Are they telling you a reason why it's disgusting, or they're just saying
it's mostly because they got brought up like morally thinking it's disgusting, and
right.
I think religion has a big stranglehold on them when it comes to the subject.
Sure. And there's no moment when you're with your girlfriend that you think, I am snuggling up with my sister. There's something a little odd about this. That doesn't ever come into the way you think about your relationship?
It's never even crossed my mind. Even even at the point when we first kissed and initiated other things, it just never felt wrong, and we just never really. We sort of looked at each other at first and thought, did this just happen? And it did, and we didn't want it to stop happening. It wasn't anything like we felt disgust towards each other or anything like that. It just felt like it would with anyone else, but because of the person that she is, for me at least, it felt much, much better than anyone that I've ever been with.
I just want to give a little taste from the community of what people are saying when they're hearing this discussion. Sassafras says, it seems so undesirable and unnatural that it makes me cringe, but I guess I agree the social taboo shouldn't be criminalized. But Brad, we also got this tweet from Emma, an interesting perspective. She says, I think even having discussions like this normalizes this too much. Natural aversion is there for a reason, and it should be left alone. Do you think she has a point?
Oh, yes, I do think she has a point. In fact, this could apply not just to adult incest, but there's other things, abnormal sexual activities, relationships that our society cringes to, like, for example, bestiality, humans with sheep and things like that. We've
so Brad, I'm just going to stop.
From a health and safety
Brad, I'm just going to. Brad. Hi, Brad. I'm just going to stop
Yes.
you for a moment, because I do feel there is a distinction between bestiality, where there is no consent, and two adults having a sexual relationship where they are both consenting. So I do feel there is a distinction there. I think the bestiality route
I do see a point there as far as
one step further.
If you take a pro-animal perspective on that, but considering sheep are eaten and devoured, the essence of bringing in consent for an animal that's going to be brought to slaughter a few weeks later, I think is a tangential distinction.
All right,
the real point, though.
So now we're going really off course then, because then we're talking about vegans and vegetarianism, and then I'm losing the track that you're taking. But I'll let you finish your point.
Yeah. Well, the point is that there's nothing abnormal about society having constraints with regards to different kinds of sexual activities that impose a price upon society, upon the health and welfare of society, whether it's the unborn or the babies or others. And I also want to make a distinction here regarding the handicapped and those in an incestuous relationship. Those who are handicapped, no matter who they mate with, they're going to have a risk. But someone in an incestuous relationship has only one person, maybe two people in the entire world that if they have a relationship, they're assuming a serious risk and a price not only to their children, but also to their offspring. So there's a real key distinction here of individual choice and responsibility that comes into play when we assess whether or not society should rubber stamp this kind of activity, which we know will have an impact on from a humanitarian perspective.
Sure, I
have a question actually. Can I ask Brad a question?
Very briefly, because I've got like 3 minutes before they literally close the internet down on us. So make it quick, and Brad, make the response very quick too.
You got it. So there are other things that people do that they engage in risk, and there's things to mitigate such risks. So if there were things to mitigate such risks for sexual freedom, would you be for that, so that you didn't have to punish it, but instead individuals could just take their own actions to mitigate risk?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I believe that the extent to which the risk could be completely mitigated. The only problem with that is, if, for example, we have a couple who says, okay, we're going to engage in incestuous relationship, but we're going to go ahead and have ourselves permanently fixed so we can't have children. Well, the problem with that is, in order for a couple to reach that point, they've probably already engaged in sexual relations and already acted out that risk. That's the problem. But I do believe conceptually that mitigating risk is something that definitely should analytically be taken into the equation.
All right, so I'm just going to give the last word to Fez, because Fez has got the most experience on this issue. Fez, your future of your relationship, what do you want for it?
Well, ideally, although I don't see it even possible, just being able to live our relationship in freedom. Like, even if we can't marry, just not have to look over our shoulders over like hearing threats, etc. Just want to be able to live our lives the best we can.
Do you think you've met your life partner, your
not
sister?
Be a criminal for her.
Do you think your sister is your life partner?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, she's the love of my life. I didn't know what it was until I met her, so I don't want to give her up for anything, even if it means being thrown in jail.
So that is Fez. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Fez. Fez is dating his sister, his half-sister. We also had Deborah Lieberman in the conversation. She's from the University of Miami. And also Brad Dacus, who is president of the Pacific Justice Institute. Thank you so much, guests. What is the community saying?
Well, I'll leave you with 2 tweets, just kind of representing the divide I'm seeing online. Emily is someone who tweeted us saying, I've been with my sister for 4 years, and if it's consensual, I see no ethical problems. Where do we draw the line on prohibiting people's lives? On the other hand, Chief Justice writes in, consensual or not, incest is by far the most scientifically unwise thing to partake upon.
Thank you for being part of the conversation. If you still have more to say, hashtag AJStream. On our next program, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani made a lot of promises to his people during the election campaign, and now that he's been in office for over a year, we ask Iranians how he's doing. We will do that conversation on the next AJ Stream. See you soon.